Human beings are often drawn toward what they cannot fully understand or predict. One of the most fascinating patterns in psychology is that certainty does not always create fascination. Uncertainty often does. When someone constantly offers attention, reassurance, and availability, the mind quickly adapts to that consistency. What once felt exciting becomes familiar, and familiarity, while essential for trust in healthy relationships, does not always stimulate curiosity. In contrast, when another person's intentions or level of interest remain unclear, the mind naturally begins searching for answers. It wants to complete the unfinished picture. This is not because uncertainty is inherently good, but because the human brain is wired to seek closure whenever it encounters unanswered questions. Think about how often people replay a conversation in their minds after receiving mixed signals. They remember small details, analyze a delayed response, or wonder why someone's behavior suddenly changed. Instead of moving forward, their thoughts repeatedly circle around the unknown. The unanswered question begins occupying more mental space than a clear answer ever would. This psychological tendency explains why uncertainty often feels emotionally powerful. The brain dislikes incomplete information, so it continues investing attention until it finds an explanation or creates one. This pattern extends far beyond relationships. A mystery novel keeps readers engaged because they do not know how it ends. An unfinished story remains memorable because the ending is missing. Even in everyday life, people remember interrupted tasks more vividly than completed ones because the mind instinctively seeks completion. Human attention naturally gravitates toward what feels unresolved. The same principle can influence social dynamics. When someone appears emotionally unpredictable, observers may become increasingly curious about them. Curiosity, however, should never be mistaken for genuine respect, compatibility, or lasting affection. Curiosity simply means the mind is engaged. Healthy relationships require much more than mental fascination. They require honesty, emotional safety, communication, and mutual trust. Without these qualities, uncertainty may create temporary attention but cannot build lasting connection. Another important factor is that people often project their own desires onto uncertainty. When they know very little about someone, they unconsciously fill the gaps with imagination. Instead of seeing the person as they truly are, they begin creating an idealized version based on hopes, assumptions, or fantasies. The less information available, the easier it becomes to imagine perfection where none may exist. This explains why distance sometimes makes people appear more extraordinary than reality eventually reveals. Emotional maturity begins when we recognize this tendency within ourselves. Rather than asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about this person?" we can ask a deeper question. Am I attracted to who they actually are, or am I simply trying to solve the uncertainty surrounding them? That single question shifts attention away from emotional impulse and towards self-awareness. It encourages reflection instead of obsession. People with strong emotional intelligence understand that not every feeling deserves immediate action. They realize that intense curiosity is not always a sign of deep compatibility. Sometimes it is simply the mind responding to ambiguity. By recognizing this, they become less reactive and more intentional in their choices. Instead of chasing emotional uncertainty, they prioritize relationships built on consistency, honesty, and shared values. The greatest lesson is not that you should become mysterious or intentionally distant. Genuine confidence does not come from creating confusion in others. It comes from understanding your own emotions so well that uncertainty no longer controls your decisions. When your sense of worth is rooted in character, purpose, and self-respect, you stop confusing unpredictability with value. You begin appreciating the quiet strength of clarity, mutual respect, and authentic connection. In the end, the strongest relationships are not those that keep people guessing. They are the ones that allow both individuals to grow without fear, without games, and without constantly questioning where they stand. That is the true foundation of emotional wisdom and lasting human connection. Many people assume that attraction is created by constant availability, endless reassurance, and giving more of themselves than anyone asks for. Yet human psychology often reveals a more complex reality. One of the strongest cognitive biases influencing our perception is the scarcity effect, the tendency to assign greater value to things that appear limited, uncommon, or difficult to obtain. This principle is visible everywhere. Limited edition products seem more desirable than mass-produced ones. Exclusive opportunities often attract more attention than those available to everyone. The same psychological pattern can subtly appear in human relationships, though it should always be understood responsibly and ethically. When someone protects their time, values their commitments, and refuses to abandon their personal goals simply to gain approval, they often project an image of confidence and self-respect. It is not because they are ignoring people or trying to create artificial mystery. It is because their behavior communicates that their attention has meaning. Their life does not revolve around pleasing everyone they meet. Instead, it revolves around living according to principles, priorities, and purpose. That quiet discipline naturally earns respect because it demonstrates emotional maturity rather than emotional dependence. Unfortunately, many misunderstand this principle. They believe scarcity means acting cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. They intentionally delay responses, withdraw affection, or create confusion in hopes of making others chase them. While such tactics may capture temporary attention, they rarely build lasting trust. Relationships sustained through manipulation eventually collapse under the weight of uncertainty and insecurity. Genuine influence cannot be manufactured through emotional games. It grows from authenticity, consistency, and integrity. The deeper lesson is not about becoming unavailable. It is about becoming valuable through continuous self-development. Consider two individuals. One spends every waking moment trying to impress others, constantly seeking validation, changing opinions to fit the crowd, and sacrificing personal goals for acceptance. The other invests time in learning new skills, maintaining physical and mental health, strengthening character, pursuing meaningful work, and nurturing healthy relationships without abandoning their own identity. Which person is likely to command greater long-term respect? The answer has little to do with appearance or popularity. It has everything to do with purpose. Purpose changes how people carry themselves. Someone who is building a meaningful future naturally becomes selective with their energy because they recognize that time is one of life's most valuable resources. They cannot afford to waste every hour seeking approval from people whose opinions constantly change. This selectiveness is not arrogance. It is responsibility. They understand that every yes to unnecessary distractions may become a no to personal growth. There is another important psychological reason why purpose attracts people. Human beings instinctively admire competence. We are inspired by individuals who dedicate themselves to mastery, whether in business, art, science, leadership, athletics, or personal development. Their commitment signals reliability and discipline. These qualities create admiration because they suggest internal strength rather than dependence on external applause. Confidence built on competence is far more stable than confidence built on compliments. This principle also teaches an essential lesson about boundaries. Healthy boundaries are often mistaken for rejection, but they are actually expressions of self-respect. A person who values their own time is better equipped to value the time of others. Someone who protects their emotional well-being is more capable of offering genuine kindness instead of exhausted people-pleasing. Boundaries preserve relationships because they prevent resentment from silently accumulating beneath forced generosity. The irony is that many people become most attractive at the exact moment they stop trying so desperately to appear attractive. When attention shifts away from constant validation and toward meaningful living, confidence begins to emerge naturally. Conversations become more authentic because there is no longer a desperate need to impress. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by values instead of fear. Relationships become healthier because they are built on mutual respect rather than emotional dependency. Ultimately, the real scarcity that matters is not your availability to other people. It is the uniqueness of your character. Your integrity cannot be mass-produced. Your discipline cannot be borrowed. Your wisdom cannot be purchased overnight. These qualities become rare because they require years of patience, self-reflection, and consistent effort to develop. People may initially notice confidence, but they remain because of character. The true goal, then, is not to make people chase you. Chasing is temporary, often driven by curiosity or emotion. Respect, however, is enduring. Respect grows when your words align with your actions, when your priorities reflect your principles, and when your life demonstrates that you are committed to becoming your best self, regardless of who is watching. When your value comes from the person you are becoming instead of the attention you receive, you gain something far greater than admiration. You gain freedom. That freedom allows you to build relationships based not on scarcity or manipulation, but on authenticity, mutual appreciation, and lasting trust. Emotional independence is one of the rarest forms of strength because it is invisible. It cannot be measured by appearance, wealth, popularity, or status. It reveals itself only when life becomes uncertain. Anyone can appear confident when everything is going well, when they are surrounded by admiration, and when people constantly validate their choices. But true emotional independence is tested when approval disappears, when expectations are unmet, or when relationships become complicated. At that moment, a person's inner foundation is exposed. Some collapse under the weight of rejection, while others remain calm because their sense of worth was never built upon the opinions of others. This difference explains why emotionally independent individuals often leave a lasting impression wherever they go. Their confidence is not loud, dramatic, or attention-seeking. It is quiet, stable, and deeply rooted in self-awareness. Many people unknowingly surrender control of their emotions to external circumstances. Their happiness rises and falls depending on how they are treated by friends, family, coworkers, or strangers. A compliment makes them feel valuable, while a criticism convinces them they are inadequate. A delayed message creates anxiety. A small disagreement becomes a personal crisis. Gradually, their emotional state becomes controlled by forces outside their own influence. This is not because they are weak, but because they have been conditioned to believe that self-worth must be confirmed by someone else. They spend years chasing reassurance instead of building inner certainty. Emotional independence breaks this cycle. It begins when a person realizes that peace cannot be borrowed from other people. Approval may feel satisfying, but it is temporary. Popularity may be exciting, but it changes quickly. Recognition may boost confidence, but it is never guaranteed. The only reliable source of lasting confidence is the belief that your character, your values, and your daily actions are enough to give your life meaning. When you understand this truth, you stop living as a prisoner of public opinion. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires discipline and honest self-reflection. It means learning to enjoy your own company instead of constantly seeking distraction. It means accepting that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected, while solitude can become the birthplace of wisdom. In moments of quiet, without the noise of constant validation, people begin discovering who they truly are. They recognize their fears, their strengths, their weaknesses, and the values they genuinely believe in. This self-knowledge becomes the foundation of emotional freedom. People who possess emotional independence do not become cold or indifferent. They continue to care deeply about others, but they refuse to let every interaction determine their emotional balance. They celebrate meaningful relationships without becoming emotionally dependent on them. They appreciate praise without becoming addicted to it. They accept criticism without allowing it to destroy their confidence. Their emotions are guided by principles rather than impulses. This quiet stability often creates a powerful presence. Others feel comfortable around emotionally independent people because they do not radiate desperation or insecurity. They are patient listeners. They do not interrupt conversations simply to prove themselves. They do not exaggerate their achievements to gain admiration. They allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Their calmness communicates something words cannot. They are secure within themselves. History repeatedly shows that the most respected individuals were rarely obsessed with pleasing everyone. They remained committed to their purpose even when misunderstood. They focused more on improving themselves than controlling how others perceived them. Their confidence was not based on universal approval, but on unwavering dedication to meaningful work and personal integrity. Ultimately, emotional independence is not about making people admire you. It is about reaching a point where admiration is no longer necessary for your happiness. Ironically, this is often when genuine respect begins to appear naturally. People are drawn to those who stand firmly on their own values because such individuals demonstrate a rare quality in today's world: the ability to remain peaceful in the middle of uncertainty. That peace cannot be purchased, borrowed, or performed. It is earned through self-awareness, discipline, and the courage to become your own source of strength. Many people believe they are searching for love, respect, admiration, or acceptance. But beneath those desires often lies something even more powerful: the need for validation. Validation is the emotional reassurance that tells us we matter, that we are worthy, that we are enough. It is a natural human need because we are social creatures. From childhood, we learn to associate praise with safety, approval with belonging, and recognition with value. A smile from a parent, encouragement from a teacher, applause from friends, these experiences help shape our confidence. The problem begins when validation stops being something we appreciate and becomes something we cannot live without. When your sense of worth depends entirely on how other people respond to you, you unknowingly hand over control of your emotional life. Your happiness rises and falls with every compliment, every message, every like, every invitation, and every opinion. If someone praises you, you feel unstoppable. If someone criticizes or ignores you, your confidence crumbles. At that point, your emotions are no longer guided by your own principles, but by the unpredictable behavior of others. This creates an exhausting cycle where you constantly seek reassurance, hoping someone else will confirm that you are valuable. Human psychology explains why this happens. The brain naturally pays close attention to social acceptance because throughout history, belonging to a group increased the chances of survival. Rejection once carried serious consequences, so our minds evolved to notice it quickly. Although modern life is very different, that ancient emotional wiring still exists. A delayed reply, a lack of attention, or public criticism can trigger feelings far stronger than the situation actually deserves. Understanding this tendency is important because it reminds us that not every emotional reaction reflects objective reality. Sometimes the brain is simply responding to an old survival mechanism rather than a present-day threat. The greatest danger is that people who desperately seek validation often begin changing themselves to satisfy everyone around them. They silence their opinions to avoid disagreement. They pretend to enjoy things they dislike. They accept disrespect because they fear losing approval. They become experts at reading the room while gradually forgetting how to read themselves. Every decision becomes a negotiation with public opinion instead of an honest reflection of personal values. Over time, they may gain temporary acceptance but lose something far more valuable, their authenticity. Ironically, people tend to respect authenticity far more than constant people-pleasing. Someone who calmly stands by their principles without arrogance communicates inner strength. They do not argue with every critic, nor do they desperately chase every admirer. Their confidence comes from knowing who they are rather than from convincing everyone else. This kind of self-respect cannot be manufactured through appearances because it is built quietly through consistent actions and personal integrity. One of the healthiest ways to reduce dependence on validation is to shift attention from approval to improvement. Instead of asking, "Do people think I'm good enough?" ask, "Am I becoming better than I was yesterday?" That simple change transforms confidence from something fragile into something durable. Progress becomes more meaningful than praise. Discipline becomes more satisfying than applause. Character becomes more important than reputation. This is why mastering skills is so powerful. Every time you learn something difficult, keep a promise to yourself. Overcome fear, or remain honest under pressure. You build evidence that your value does not depend on someone else's opinion. Confidence earned through effort is much harder to destroy than confidence borrowed from compliments. External praise may feel wonderful, but it fades quickly. Inner confidence grows slowly, yet it remains steady because it is supported by real experience. There is another psychological truth worth remembering. Not everyone will appreciate you, no matter how kind, talented, or genuine you become. People judge through the lens of their own experiences, expectations, and insecurities. Some will misunderstand your silence as weakness, while others will admire it as wisdom. Some will criticize your ambition, while others will find it inspiring. Trying to satisfy every perspective is impossible because those perspectives constantly change. Chasing universal approval is like chasing the horizon. It always moves farther away. Emotional maturity begins when you recognize that disagreement is not always rejection, criticism is not always failure, and silence is not always disapproval. Mature individuals can listen to feedback without allowing it to define their identity. They remain open to learning while refusing to let temporary opinions determine permanent self-worth. This balance allows them to grow without becoming emotionally dependent. The strongest confidence is quiet. It does not demand attention, constantly defend itself, or seek recognition in every room. It simply continues working, learning, improving, and living according to deeply held values. Such people appreciate encouragement, but they are not controlled by it. They welcome appreciation, yet they do not collapse without it. Their identity is rooted in something stronger than public opinion. Ultimately, freedom begins the moment your self-respect becomes greater than your need for approval. When you no longer measure your worth by applause, criticism loses much of its power. You become more honest because you no longer fear disappointing everyone. You become more courageous because your decisions are guided by principles instead of popularity. And you become more peaceful because your happiness is no longer held hostage by the unpredictable judgments of other people. That is the true foundation of lasting confidence, not convincing the world that you are enough, but proving to yourself, through consistent character and purposeful action, that you have always been enough to continue growing. Respect is one of the rarest currencies in human relationships because it cannot be demanded, purchased, or forced into existence. It emerges naturally when people recognize that an individual values themselves enough to protect their own peace, time, and emotional well-being. This is where boundaries become one of the most misunderstood aspects of psychology. Many people assume that setting limits will push others away, make them appear selfish, or damage important relationships. In reality, healthy boundaries often create stronger, more balanced connections because they establish clarity instead of confusion. They communicate that kindness does not require self-sacrifice, and that generosity does not mean abandoning your own needs. Every healthy relationship, whether personal, professional, or social, depends on mutual respect, and mutual respect begins when each person understands where their responsibilities end and another person's begin. The absence of boundaries often leads people into a dangerous cycle of emotional exhaustion. They say yes when every instinct tells them to say no. They accept disrespect because they fear conflict. They tolerate behavior that slowly erodes their confidence because they believe keeping everyone happy is more important than protecting their own dignity. At first, these compromises seem harmless. They believe they are simply being kind, patient, or understanding. Yet over time, each ignored discomfort becomes another brick in a wall of resentment. The person who constantly gives without limits eventually feels invisible because their efforts become expected rather than appreciated. Human nature quickly adapts to whatever becomes normal. When people consistently receive unlimited access to your time, attention, and emotional energy, they often stop recognizing the value of those gifts. This is why boundaries are not walls designed to isolate people. They are filters that protect healthy relationships from becoming unhealthy ones. A boundary does not declare, "I don't care about you." Instead, it quietly communicates, "I care about this relationship enough to ensure that it remains respectful for both of us." Emotional maturity means understanding that love and respect cannot thrive where one person's identity is constantly sacrificed for another's comfort. The strongest individuals are not those who constantly rescue everyone around them. They are the ones who understand when to help, when to listen, and when to step back so that others can take responsibility for their own choices. Many people spend years believing they must earn love through endless availability. They answer every call immediately, solve every problem, agree with every request, and place everyone else's priorities above their own. Ironically, this often produces the opposite of the desired result. Instead of creating deeper appreciation, it creates dependency or complacency. When someone becomes endlessly accessible, their presence begins to feel ordinary rather than meaningful. This is not because people are naturally ungrateful. It is because familiarity reduces conscious appreciation. Just as people often overlook the value of clean air until they struggle to breathe, they may overlook consistent emotional support until it is no longer limitless. Boundaries gently remind others that your energy is valuable because it is finite. Psychologically, boundaries also strengthen self-respect. Every time you honor your values instead of acting from fear, you reinforce an internal belief that your needs matter. This quiet act transforms confidence from something performed for others into something experienced within yourself. Confidence is not built by receiving applause. It is built by repeatedly making decisions that align with your principles. Each respectful no spoken when necessary becomes evidence that you trust your own judgment. Each decision to protect your mental peace rather than pleasing everyone strengthens your emotional independence. Over time, this creates a calm presence that others naturally recognize. People tend to trust individuals who remain consistent because consistency reflects integrity, and integrity creates lasting respect. There is also an important distinction between boundaries and emotional distance. Some people believe they must become cold, unavailable, or indifferent to command respect. This misunderstanding often damages relationships because emotional withdrawal is not the same as emotional strength. Healthy boundaries never require abandoning compassion. They simply ensure that compassion is balanced with wisdom. You can be generous without allowing yourself to be exploited. You can be forgiving without accepting repeated disrespect. You can be understanding without becoming responsible for another person's unwillingness to grow. Emotional intelligence lies in recognizing that kindness without boundaries often becomes self-neglect, while boundaries without kindness become isolation. The healthiest path combines both. History repeatedly demonstrates that respected leaders, teachers, mentors, and visionaries rarely attempted to please everyone. Instead, they remained committed to principles even when those principles were unpopular. Their boundaries protected not only themselves but also the missions they served. They understood that saying yes to every demand inevitably meant saying no to something more meaningful. The same principle applies to everyday life. Every unnecessary obligation accepted consumes time that could have been invested in learning, creating, healing, resting, or strengthening relationships that genuinely matter. Boundaries are therefore not limitations on your life, they are protections for your purpose. Ultimately, people respect those who respect themselves because self-respect establishes the standard for every future interaction. Others observe how you respond to criticism, pressure, manipulation, and unreasonable expectations. If you repeatedly abandon your values to gain temporary approval, people unconsciously learn that your principles are negotiable. But when you remain calm, respectful, and unwavering in protecting your dignity, you communicate something far more powerful than words ever could. You demonstrate that your character is not for sale and that your peace cannot be purchased through guilt or social pressure. This quiet strength does not seek admiration, yet it often earns it naturally. The deepest respect is rarely created by trying to impress people. It is created by living with enough courage to honor your values, enough wisdom to protect your boundaries, and enough humility to treat others with fairness while refusing to betray yourself. Curiosity is one of the most underestimated forces in human psychology. The human brain is naturally drawn toward what it has not yet fully understood. From childhood, people learn by exploring, questioning, and discovering. This instinct never truly disappears. It simply evolves into more complex forms. In relationships, conversations, friendships, and even professional environments, people often become more invested in those who continue to reveal depth over time, rather than exposing every aspect of themselves all at once. This is not because secrecy is inherently attractive, but because gradual discovery keeps the mind engaged. When every answer is immediately available, curiosity fades. When there is room to learn, understand, and appreciate another person's growth, interest tends to remain alive. Many people make the mistake of believing they must constantly prove their worth by talking endlessly about themselves, explaining every thought, or seeking continuous attention. Ironically, this often produces the opposite effect. When someone feels compelled to reveal everything immediately, there is little opportunity for natural discovery. Healthy relationships are not built through information overload. They develop through shared experiences, meaningful conversations, mutual respect, and consistent trust over time. Think about reading a remarkable book. If someone were to reveal every chapter, every twist, and every conclusion before you even opened the first page, much of the excitement would disappear. The story itself would remain valuable, but the emotional experience of discovering it would be gone. Human relationships function in a surprisingly similar way. Every individual carries unique experiences, beliefs, ambitions, fears, and dreams. Allowing these dimensions to unfold naturally creates a relationship that feels alive because both people continue learning about each other. This principle should never be confused with emotional games or intentional distance. Genuine curiosity is very different from manipulation. Manipulation creates confusion by withholding honesty for the sake of control. Healthy curiosity, on the other hand, comes from authenticity. It is the natural result of living a rich and evolving life. A person who is continuously learning new skills, reading new ideas, pursuing meaningful goals, and developing emotionally will never run out of interesting conversations because they are constantly becoming a newer version of themselves. One of the reasons emotionally mature individuals remain compelling is that they do not define themselves by a single identity. They are not only employees, students, parents, or entrepreneurs. They are lifelong learners. They cultivate interests outside their careers. They challenge their assumptions. They travel when possible, read diverse perspectives, develop hobbies, improve their physical and mental health, and seek wisdom instead of merely collecting information. Every experience adds another layer to their character. This continual growth naturally inspires curiosity in others. People enjoy spending time with individuals who possess depth because every conversation offers something fresh. There is always another lesson, another perspective, another story, or another insight waiting to be discovered. Their value does not come from being mysterious for the sake of appearing important. It comes from genuinely becoming more knowledgeable, compassionate, disciplined, and self-aware as life progresses. There is another psychological reason curiosity remains so powerful. The human brain is designed to notice patterns while also searching for novelty. Predictability creates comfort, but novelty stimulates attention. The healthiest relationships contain both. They provide emotional security while also encouraging continuous discovery. Two people who stop growing individually often find that their conversations become repetitive because neither is bringing new experiences into the relationship. In contrast, when each person continues pursuing personal development, the relationship itself continues evolving. Consider two lifelong friends. One spends years repeating the same routines without learning anything new, while the other consistently expands their knowledge, develops new skills, explores different cultures, and reflects deeply on life's experiences. Which one is likely to inspire more engaging conversations over the years? The answer is obvious. Growth creates depth, and depth naturally sustains curiosity. Curiosity also strengthens respect because it requires humility. Truly curious people understand that they do not know everything. Instead of speaking only to impress others, they ask thoughtful questions. They listen carefully. They remain open to changing their opinions when presented with better evidence. This willingness to learn makes them emotionally approachable because conversations become opportunities for mutual discovery rather than competitions for attention. Another overlooked truth is that people become more interesting when they are genuinely interested in others. Many assume charisma comes from speaking brilliantly, but in reality, remarkable communicators often spend more time listening than talking. They make others feel seen, heard, and understood. Their curiosity about people builds stronger emotional connections than endless self-promotion ever could. Purpose also plays an essential role in sustaining curiosity. Individuals consumed entirely by the need for approval often stop exploring the world because their attention becomes trapped in wondering what others think of them. Meanwhile, people driven by meaningful goals naturally accumulate experiences worth sharing. Their curiosity extends beyond social validation toward knowledge, creativity, contribution, and personal excellence. As a result, their lives become richer and their presence becomes more engaging without any deliberate attempt to attract attention. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: the goal is not to make yourself appear mysterious. The goal is to become genuinely multidimensional. Build a life that continues expanding long after the applause fades. Read books that challenge your thinking. Learn skills that humble you. Travel if you can. Develop wisdom through experience. Practice emotional intelligence. Strengthen your discipline. Serve others. Pursue meaningful work. Every step of genuine self-development adds another chapter to your story. When your life becomes a continuous journey of growth, curiosity follows naturally. Not because you are hiding who you are, but because there is always something new to discover. People are drawn not to empty mystery, but to authentic depth. And authentic depth is never manufactured overnight. It is earned through years of learning, reflection, resilience, and purposeful living. The individuals who leave the greatest impression are rarely those who demand attention. They are the ones whose lives continually expand beyond comfort, whose minds remain open despite success, and whose character grows stronger through every challenge. Their curiosity about life becomes contagious. Their passion for learning inspires others to grow. Their presence reminds everyone around them that the most fascinating person in the room is often the one who never stopped becoming a student of life. Most people believe influence begins with controlling others. They study persuasion, body language, charisma, and social status, hoping these external skills will earn admiration and respect. Yet history repeatedly reveals a different truth. The individuals who leave the deepest impression on the world are rarely those obsessed with managing the opinions of others. Instead, they are people who have learned to govern themselves. Self-mastery is the quiet force behind lasting confidence, emotional stability, and genuine influence. It is the ability to remain calm when emotions tempt you to react, to stay committed when distractions invite you to quit, and to act according to principles instead of impulses. While approval from others rises and falls like the tide, self-mastery creates an inner foundation that cannot be shaken by temporary praise or criticism. Human beings naturally seek acceptance because we are social creatures. From childhood, our brains learn to associate approval with safety and belonging. Compliments make us feel valued, while rejection can feel deeply personal. There is nothing inherently wrong with appreciating recognition. The danger begins when external approval becomes the primary source of identity. A person who depends entirely on praise slowly hands control of their emotional state to everyone around them. One compliment lifts their confidence, while one criticism destroys it. They become prisoners of public opinion, constantly adjusting their personality to fit whatever environment they happen to enter. Instead of asking, "What do I believe?" they begin asking, "What will people think?" Over time, this dependence weakens decision-making because every choice becomes filtered through the fear of judgment rather than the pursuit of purpose. Self-mastery breaks this invisible chain. It teaches that real confidence is not loud, dramatic, or constantly seeking attention. Genuine confidence is quiet because it does not require continuous validation to survive. A disciplined individual understands that emotions are temporary visitors, not permanent rulers. They experience disappointment, frustration, excitement, and fear just like everyone else, but they refuse to let those emotions dictate every action. When anger appears, they pause before speaking. When success arrives, they remain humble instead of becoming arrogant. When failure strikes, they search for lessons instead of excuses. Their strength comes from consistency rather than intensity. One of the greatest tests of self-mastery occurs during moments of emotional pressure. Imagine receiving unfair criticism after months of hard work. The immediate impulse may be to defend yourself, argue endlessly, or seek revenge. These reactions are understandable because the human ego naturally wants to protect itself. Yet emotionally mature individuals recognize that not every battle deserves participation. They understand that every reaction consumes energy, and energy is one of life's most valuable resources. Instead of reacting impulsively, they evaluate whether responding serves their long-term goals. Sometimes silence communicates more confidence than endless explanation. Sometimes patience accomplishes what force never could. Another essential element of self-mastery is delayed gratification. Modern society constantly encourages immediate rewards. We want instant results, instant recognition, instant success, and instant happiness. Yet meaningful achievement rarely follows this timeline. Great careers, healthy relationships, financial stability, physical fitness, and personal wisdom all require sustained effort over long periods. The disciplined person accepts temporary discomfort because they remain focused on permanent growth. They understand that today's sacrifices become tomorrow's freedom. While others chase quick satisfaction, they invest in lasting fulfillment. Self-mastery also transforms relationships. People often assume influence comes from dominating conversations or impressing others with intelligence. In reality, one of the most influential qualities is emotional steadiness. Individuals feel safe around someone who remains composed during conflict, listens without rushing to judgment, and responds thoughtfully instead of impulsively. This stability builds trust because it demonstrates reliability. Others know they are interacting with someone guided by values rather than unpredictable emotions. Such influence cannot be manufactured through techniques alone. It emerges naturally from years of inner discipline. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of self-mastery is the courage to remain authentic. When approval becomes the ultimate goal, people begin wearing masks. They hide opinions, suppress values, and imitate personalities they believe will be accepted. This creates constant inner conflict because pretending requires endless maintenance. Authenticity, however, grows when self-respect becomes stronger than the desire to please everyone. This does not mean becoming rude or ignoring constructive feedback. It means making decisions that align with your principles, even when they are unpopular. True integrity is revealed not when everyone agrees with you, but when you remain faithful to your values despite disagreement. The paradox of human nature is that people often admire those who are least consumed by the need for admiration. They are drawn to individuals whose confidence comes from competence, whose peace comes from purpose, and whose identity is rooted in character rather than applause. Such people are not emotionally distant, they are emotionally grounded. They appreciate encouragement without depending on it. They welcome success without becoming controlled by it. They face criticism without allowing it to define them. Ultimately, the greatest victory is not convincing the world to recognize your worth. The greatest victory is developing such deep self-respect that your worth no longer depends on recognition. External approval will always be uncertain because opinions constantly change. One generation celebrates what another rejects. One audience applauds while another criticizes. Building your identity upon these shifting foundations guarantees emotional instability. Building it upon discipline, wisdom, integrity, and purposeful action creates something far more enduring. When you master your emotions, you no longer become a victim of every circumstance. When you master your habits, your future begins changing before your eyes. When you master your thoughts, fear gradually loses its authority. And when you master yourself, you discover a remarkable truth. The strongest form of influence does not come from controlling other people. It comes from becoming someone whose character quietly commands respect without demanding it. That is the kind of power that cannot be taken away because it is built from within rather than granted from without. Human beings rarely become obsessed with what is fully understood. Instead, the mind is naturally drawn toward uncertainty, unanswered questions, and emotional ambiguity. This is one of the most fascinating principles in psychology. When people know exactly where they stand, their emotional energy often settles into stability. But when certainty disappears, the imagination awakens. The mind begins searching for missing pieces, replaying conversations, analyzing facial expressions, and assigning meaning to small details that might otherwise go unnoticed. This tendency is not a sign of weakness. It is part of how the human brain attempts to reduce uncertainty. Yet, if left unchecked, it can lead people to invest enormous emotional energy in situations that deserve very little of it. Many individuals mistakenly interpret uncertainty as evidence that something is valuable, when in reality uncertainty merely captures attention. Emotional maturity begins with recognizing the difference between genuine value and psychological fascination. Think about how often people remember unfinished conversations more vividly than completed ones. An unanswered message can occupy someone's thoughts for hours, while a warm and predictable interaction is often taken for granted. The brain is designed to notice incomplete patterns because unresolved situations create mental tension. This phenomenon encourages curiosity, but it can also create unnecessary emotional attachment. Instead of appreciating people for who they truly are, we sometimes become attached to the stories we invent about them. We chase clarity rather than connection. We become fascinated by possibility rather than reality. Understanding this tendency allows us to step outside our emotional impulses and ask a more intelligent question. Am I pursuing a meaningful relationship, or am I simply trying to resolve uncertainty? That single question has the power to transform emotional decision-making. Another powerful principle is the psychology of perceived value. Throughout history, scarcity has influenced human behavior in nearly every area of life. We naturally appreciate things that appear limited because rarity signals importance. This principle influences markets, art, opportunities, and relationships alike. However, many people misunderstand this concept and assume they must become emotionally distant or intentionally unavailable to gain respect. That interpretation misses the deeper lesson. Healthy scarcity is not about pretending to be busy or ignoring people. It is about genuinely living a purposeful life. A person committed to meaningful goals, disciplined habits, lifelong learning, and personal growth naturally has limited time and attention, not because they are avoiding others, but because they are building something worthwhile. Their presence becomes valuable because it reflects intentional living rather than constant availability. The lesson is not to withdraw affection. It is to protect your energy so that your attention remains meaningful instead of becoming carelessly distributed. Emotional independence represents another cornerstone of psychological strength. Far too many people unknowingly place their happiness in the hands of others. Their mood rises with praise and collapses with criticism. Their confidence depends upon being noticed, accepted, or admired. While appreciation is a healthy part of human connection, dependence on approval creates emotional instability. Emotionally independent individuals experience rejection differently. They acknowledge disappointment, but they do not allow temporary setbacks to define their identity. Their confidence is rooted in character rather than compliments. They understand that no amount of external admiration can permanently satisfy someone who has never learned to respect themselves. This quiet inner stability often appears attractive to others because it communicates security rather than desperation. The goal is not to stop caring about relationships. The goal is to care without surrendering your emotional freedom. Closely connected to emotional independence is the hidden danger of excessive validation seeking. Many people spend years chasing recognition without realizing that every act motivated solely by approval slowly weakens authentic confidence. When every decision is filtered through the question, "Will people like me?" individuality begins to disappear. People become performers rather than genuine human beings. They suppress opinions, imitate personalities, and constantly adjust themselves to meet changing expectations. This creates a fragile identity because it depends entirely on outside reactions. Genuine confidence grows differently. It develops through discipline, competence, honesty, and the repeated experience of keeping promises to yourself. Every time you choose integrity over popularity, your inner foundation becomes stronger. Validation may feel rewarding, but self-respect creates lasting peace. When your standards become more important than public applause, you begin living according to principles rather than pressure. That transformation marks the beginning of authentic personal freedom. Healthy boundaries are another psychological principle frequently misunderstood. Boundaries are not walls built to keep people away. They are guidelines that protect emotional well-being while allowing healthy relationships to flourish. Without boundaries, kindness easily becomes self-neglect. Many generous individuals exhaust themselves because they fear disappointing others. They say yes when they desperately need rest. They tolerate disrespect because they mistake patience for weakness. Eventually, resentment replaces compassion. Healthy boundaries prevent this cycle. They communicate self-respect without hostility. They remind both ourselves and others that emotional energy, time, and attention are valuable resources. People often admire individuals with clear boundaries because they project consistency and emotional maturity. Such individuals are not controlled by guilt or external pressure. Instead, they make thoughtful decisions aligned with their values. Respect grows where self-respect already exists, and healthy relationships become stronger when both individuals honor each other's limits instead of constantly sacrificing themselves for approval. Human curiosity also plays a remarkable role in attraction and attention. Curiosity is one of the strongest motivational forces in psychology. It inspires exploration, creativity, learning, and emotional investment. Yet curiosity should never be confused with manipulation. Some believe mystery means withholding affection or creating confusion. In reality, genuine mystery comes from continual growth. Interesting people remain interesting because they continue evolving. They read widely, develop new skills, pursue meaningful experiences, and expand their understanding of life. Every conversation with them reveals something new because they are never standing still. Their identity is not built around impressing others, but around becoming a better version of themselves. Relationships become richer when two growing individuals continually discover new dimensions within each other. Curiosity sustained through authentic development creates lasting connection, whereas curiosity manufactured through emotional games eventually collapses under distrust. Growth, not manipulation, is what keeps relationships intellectually and emotionally alive.